The idea and practice of self-remembering lies at the heart of the fourth way system, which George Gurdjieff brought to the Western world in the early 20th century. The idea of self-remembering really encompasses the entire system, because all of the other ideas in the system connect to this central core. A simple description of self-remembering is to be aware of yourself in your surroundings, wherever you are and whatever you are doing. At first glance, this seems simple and even obvious, but there is a much larger reality behind it. Just as the fourth way explains how the universe comprises a series of worlds within worlds within worlds, so does self-remembering comprise dimensions within dimensions within dimensions. Envision ripples in a pond, where the smaller ripples are encompassed by larger and larger ripples in an ever-expanding series of circles or rings that spread farther and farther across the pond. The same thing applies to what is called consciousness or awareness, in the sense that awareness can include multiple dimensions of itself. And this is what self-remembering is meant to engender. The fourth way teaches that this expansion of awareness begins for us as human beings in the smallest, innermost, most contracted dimension inside the smallest ripple or circle of our being. This is where you remember yourself physically, as a body, as a person, sitting in a chair while being aware of yourself in your surroundings. This doesn't happen automatically by itself. At least it doesn't happen with a high degree of awareness. You have to heighten your awareness. You have to know you're heightening your awareness. You have to, in other words, remember to do it. Or else a higher degree of realization has to take hold of you. In either case, when this happens, you start to become more vividly aware. And one of the things you then notice more clearly is all the space between you and the surroundings in which you find yourself. This is a legitimate dimension and degree of what the fourth way calls self-remembering. But there is also more that can be added to it. For example, while being aware in your physical surroundings, you can also become more aware in your psychological surroundings. Instead of becoming all the thoughts and feelings that pass through your mind, you begin to notice that you can notice them. In other words, you begin to realize yourself as the observer in the mind. And as a result, you start to become aware of all the space between you as the observer and all the objects surrounding you in the mind. This greater expansion of awareness now encompasses two concentric circles, the world of the body and the world of the mind, the physical dimension and the psychological dimension. Beyond these two dimensions, there is a metaphysical and metapsychological world in us that we experience as a realization of being, of simply realizing that we exist in this form on the surface of what's called a planet. In this dimension of ourselves, physical sensations as well as psychological thoughts and feelings all give way to a wordless presence of being. And within this being, there is the experience of realizing the mystery of our existence and the mystery of simply beholding the larger world of creation around us. Most of the time as human beings, we're cut off from this dimension of pure perception. Rarely are we knowingly aware in this way. Suffice it to say that many seen and unseen forces keep our awareness restricted to and contracted inside the physical and psychological dimensions of our being, such that we forget altogether about the incredible mystery of our existence. And in particular, we forget about the fact that we can realize our existence, and that usually we don't. This third and higher or deeper dimension of self-realization is what many spiritual teachings call the realization of your true nature, or more accurately, your true nature realizing the reality and being of itself. This realization is beyond the feeling of self in the body and beyond the sense of I in the mind. It's marked by a subtle shift from the feeling I am to the realization I am. There is still a slight residue of identity, but it has the flavor of an impersonal knowingness, a consciousness of being. It is no longer married to the insistent feeling of I, me, my body, my life, my hopes and my fears and my travails. It has expanded beyond those dimensions. There's much more that can be said about self-remembering and about how awareness can expand much farther and much deeper. But all of that becomes meaningful only when this third dimension of awareness has established itself enough to be able to prolong itself in this dimension on its own, by virtue of its own self-sustained awareness. In the meantime, it's helpful to keep in mind that we can be aware of ourselves in and in relation to the body, as well as in and in relation to the mind, as well as in and in relation to the larger worlds of humanity, the earth, the solar system, the galaxy and galaxies, and beyond. And equally to bear in mind that all these dimensions exist in and in relation to us. The truth is that we always exist in and in relation to all these dimensions, and they in and in relation to us. It is simply a matter of whether we realize this, and the degree to which we realize it in any given moment. It is also helpful to understand that the more awareness contracts into smaller and smaller circles, or smaller and smaller dimensions, the more it embodies the feeling of I that you have so long been accustomed to. And that the more awareness expands, the more deeply and more profoundly it knows itself as the pure consciousness of being. It was with this broad meaning in mind that Gurdjieff implored his students when he would say, "Remember yourself always and everywhere."